Karen Mitchell slammed her coffee mug down so hard it cracked. She was laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, ugly, condescending laugh that echoed through the entire John Deere dealership. The kind of laugh that made every salesperson freeze. The kind that said, "This dirty old man has lost his mind." Standing before her was a 68-year-old black farmer in mud-caked boots and a grease-stained jacket. He had just said 7 words. "I want 12 John Deeres today." What Karen didn't know? Those dirty boots had walked across 2,000 acres of paid-off farmland. That stained jacket held a checkbook connected to $2.3 million in cash. And that laugh was about to cost her everything. Comment below the city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story travels. March 15th, 2011. Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m. Karen Mitchell was having a perfect day. She had closed an $87,000 combine sale before 10 o'clock. Her February commission check had just cleared, $14,200, her biggest month in 3 years. And her boss had hinted that the regional manager position might open up by summer. 15 years in agricultural equipment sales. Top performer 6 years running. Karen knew this business inside and out. She knew who had money and who didn't. She knew the difference between a serious buyer and a tire kicker. And she knew, the moment that old black man walked through the front door, that he was wasting her time. Karen watched him enter, mud on his boots, the kind that takes days to accumulate. Carhartt jacket so faded the original brown had turned gray. Grease stains on his jeans that looked permanent. A John Deere cap that looked older than the dealership itself. She didn't move from her desk. "Help you find something?" she called out. The old man walked toward her, slow, deliberate, like a man who had learned patience from decades of waiting for crops to grow. "I want to buy some tractors," he said. Karen smiled. The polite, dismissive smile she reserved for people who couldn't afford what they were looking at. "The lawn and garden section is in the back. We've got some nice riding mowers on sale. 20% off this week." The old man didn't react, just stood there, calm. "I don't need a lawnmower," he said. "I need tractors, 12 of them." Karen's smile flickered. "I'm sorry, did you say 12? "Yes, ma'am. 12 John Deere tractors. Today." Karen looked at her colleague, Steve, who was pretending to organize brochures 3 desks away. He raised his eyebrows. She turned back to the old man. "Sir, do you understand what 12 tractors cost?" "I have an idea." "Even used ones, we're talking 40, 50,000 each. That's over $500,000. "Closer to 560,000, the old man said. "I've done the math." Karen leaned back in her chair. This was either a joke or dementia. Either way, she didn't have time for it. She had real customers to call, real deals to close, real money to make. "Sir, what's your name?" "James Wilson." "Mr. Wilson, I appreciate you coming in, but I think there might be some confusion here. $500,000 in tractors isn't something people just buy on a Tuesday morning." "Why not?" Karen stopped. "Because," she started, "because that's not how things work. Because you don't look like you have $500,000. Because I've been selling equipment for 15 years, and I know a real buyer when I see one." She caught herself, chose a different approach. "Do you have financing arranged? A loan pre-approval?" "Don't need financing." "Everyone needs financing for this kind of purchase, Mr. Wilson." "I don't." Steve had stopped pretending to work. 2 other salespeople had drifted closer. The showroom had gotten very quiet. Karen stood up from her desk. She was taller than James by 3 inches. and she used every one of them. "Mr. Wilson, let me be direct with you. I've been selling agricultural equipment for 15 years. I know every serious farmer in Marshall County. I know their families. I know their land. And I don't know you. I don't come here often. That's my point. The farmers who can afford 12 tractors, I know them by name. I've been to their homes for dinner. I've sold equipment to their fathers and their grandfathers. And I've never seen you before." James looked at her. His eyes were steady, patient. The eyes of a man who had seen much worse than a condescending saleswoman in a John Deere dealership. "Maybe that's because the farmers with real money don't need to advertise it." Karen's face flushed. Was this old man talking back to her? In her dealership? In front of her colleagues? "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not serious about making a purchase." "I am serious." "Then show me proof. Show me a bank statement. Show me something that proves you can afford what you're asking for." James reached into his jacket pocket. Karen tensed, then relaxed when she saw him pull out a folded piece of paper. "This is my list," he said, placing it on her desk. "Specific models I need." Karen picked it up. Revit. 44410s, 1978 to 1982 models. 24610s, 1979 to 1983 models. 34430s, 1975 to 1979 models. 24230s, 1973 to 1977 models. 14020, 1968 to 1972 model. The list was specific, detailed, exactly the kind of list someone would write if they actually knew tractors. But that didn't change the fundamental problem. "Mr. Wilson, even if I had all these tractors, which I don't, we're still talking about $500,000. "I understand. And you're telling me you can pay cash?" "Yes, ma'am." Karen couldn't help it. She laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, loud, condescending laugh that echoed off the showroom walls. The kind of laugh that made everyone in the building turn and look. The kind of laugh that said everything she was thinking without her having to say a word. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But you expect me to believe that you—" She gestured at his dirty clothes, his worn boots, his stained jacket. "Can write a check for $500,000? James Wilson didn't flinch, didn't react. Just stood there like a man who had been laughed at before and survived it. "I didn't ask what you believe," he said quietly. "I asked if you have these tractors." Something in his voice had changed. Something cold, certain, dangerous. Karen's laugh died in her throat. "I have 4 that match your list," she said, recovering her composure. 2 4440s, a 4430, and a 4640. "How much for those 4? Karen pulled up her inventory on the computer. Part of her wanted to quote an inflated number just to watch him squirm. The 1984 4440 is listed at $38,500. The 1981 4440 is $41,200. The 1977 4430 is $34,800. And the 1982 4640 is $47,900. She did the math in her head. Total is $162,400 for just 4 tractors. She expected him to flinch, to make excuses, to suddenly remember an appointment somewhere else. Instead, James Wilson reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. Plain green checks, nothing fancy. The kind you get free from the bank. He clicked his pen. Make it out to Stevens, John Deere? Karen's smile vanished. What are you doing? Writing you a check for $162,400. Sir, I can't accept a check for that amount without verification. Then verify it. I'll wait. James finished writing, tore the check from the book, placed it on Karen's desk. She stared at it. $162,400. Signed by James Wilson. Account at First National Bank of Marshalltown. This is, she started. Call the bank, James said. I'll wait. Karen picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking slightly as she dialed. She asked for the verification department, gave them James's name and account number. The banker put her on hold. Steve had moved closer. So had the other salespeople. The showroom was dead silent. The banker came back on the line. Ma'am, I can confirm that James Wilson has an account with us. Can he cover a check for $162,400? A pause. Mr. Wilson's current checking account balance is $2,340,000. The check will clear. Karen didn't move, didn't breathe. I'm sorry, can you repeat that? $2,340,000. In his checking account? Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else? No, thank you. Karen hung up. She looked at James Wilson. Looked at his dirty boots, his stained jacket, his patched jeans. $2.3 million in his checking account. Not investments, not property value. Cash. Liquid. Ready to spend. Is the check good? James asked. Karen swallowed. Yes, it's good. Then let's talk about the other 8 tractors. Steve made a small choking sound. Karen shot him a look that could kill, but it was too late. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Mr. Wilson, I apologize if I seemed... You laughed at me. Karen stopped talking. You looked at my clothes and decided I couldn't afford a lawnmower. Then you laughed in my face, in front of your entire staff. Karen had no response, because it was true. I've been laughed at before, James continued. Been told I didn't belong. Been turned away from places because people looked at me and made assumptions. It's not new. He sat down in the chair across from her desk, slowly, like a man who had all the time in the world. You want to know how I got $2.3 million in my checking account? Karen nodded. She couldn't speak. Sit down. This might take a while. Karen sat. I was born in 1943, James began. Grew up on a farm outside Birmingham, Alabama. My father was a sharecropper. Worked land he'd never own. Grew crops he'd never profit from. Died at 52 from a heart attack in a cotton field. Karen shifted in her seat. The other salespeople had drifted even closer. I came to Iowa in 1965. Followed a girl named Eleanor, who said she'd marry me if I could give her a real home. Not a sharecropper's shack. A real home. Your wife? Karen asked. Was going to be. We got married in 1966. Bought 320 acres south of here in 1968. Land nobody else wanted because it flooded every spring, and the soil was heavy clay. Cost me everything I had, plus a mortgage that would take 25 years to pay off. James paused. His eyes had gone somewhere far away. Eleanor gave me 3 children. James Jr. in 1969, David in 1972, and Tanya in 1975. 3 kids on a farm. That's a lot of work, Karen said. Eleanor died, giving birth to Tanya. The room went silent. Complications. Doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done. She held that baby girl for about 15 minutes before she passed. James's voice cracked slightly. looked at me and said, "Don't let them give up on you, James, and don't you give up on them." Karen felt her throat tighten. She hadn't signed up for this. Everyone said I'd fail. Black man, alone with 3 kids on a farm in rural Iowa in 1975. The neighbors gave me 6 months. The bank gave me a year. My own family told me to sell the land, move back to Alabama, let someone else raise the kids. But you didn't. No, ma'am, I didn't. James leaned forward. The year Eleanor died, my neighbor, Walter Price, came to my door. White man, 60 years old, farmed the 480 acres next to mine. His wife made us a casserole. Walter asked if I needed help with spring planting. That was kind of him. That was everything. Nobody else offered. Nobody else cared. But Walter showed up every morning for 3 weeks until my crops were in the ground. Never asked for $1. Never asked for anything. James's voice caught. He cleared his throat. In 1979, Walter lost his farm. Debt. He'd borrowed heavy to buy new equipment in 1976. When interest rates went up and grain prices went down, he couldn't make payments. Bank foreclosed. I'm sorry. I went to his auction, watched strangers pick through 60 years of his family's work. His great-grandfather had homesteaded that land in 1890. Gone in one afternoon. Karen watched James's hands. They were rough, calloused, strong. The hands of a man who had worked every day of his life. Walter's tractor was a 1974 John Deere 4430. Beautiful machine, only 2,800 hours. He'd maintained it like it was his child. The bank was selling it for whatever they could get. Did you buy it? I had $12,000 saved. Took me 10 years to accumulate that money. I bid on Walter's tractor. Won it for $11,200. Took it home. To farm with? To remember. Every time I sat on that 4430, I remembered Walter's kindness, and I remembered what debt does to good people. James stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the rows of tractors gleaming in the Iowa sun. After that auction, I made a decision. I would never go into debt again. Not for equipment, not for expansion, not for anything. I would pay off my land as fast as possible and save every dollar I didn't absolutely need. That's extreme. James turned back to face her. I paid off my 320 acres in 1981. 13 years instead of 25. Saved myself over $100,000 in interest. How? Eleanor left me insurance money. $8,000. I could have used it to make life easier. Instead, I put every cent toward the mortgage. Then I worked sunup to sundown, 7 days a week. Kids helped as soon as they were old enough. We didn't take vacations, didn't buy new trucks, didn't eat at restaurants. Every spare dollar went to that mortgage. Karen thought about her own debt. Car payment, credit cards, student loan she was still paying off at 34. Once the land was paid off, I started saving for the next farm crisis. The next one? There's always a next one. Good farmers go broke every 10, 15 years. Prices crash. Weather destroys crops. Banks call loans. I knew it was coming. So I saved cash and waited. James sat back down. Between 1982 and 2008, I bought 14 farms at auction. Paid cash for every one. Farmers going bankrupt. Estates being liquidated. Divorces forcing sales. I was there with money when everyone else was drowning in debt. 14 farms? 1,680 acres total. Average price? $840 per acre. Today, that land is worth $4,000 per acre. Karen did the math in her head. 1,680 acres times $4,000. $6.7 million. Plus his original 320 acres. Another $1.3 million. $8 million in land. From a man who looked like he couldn't afford lunch. But that's not why I'm here today, James said. Karen looked at him. It's not the money, the land. That's just numbers. What matters is what you do with it. James pulled out his checkbook again. I'm 68 years old. My kids are grown. James Jr. is a surgeon in Chicago. David is an engineer in Minneapolis. Tanya is an agricultural lawyer in Des Moines. They're all successful. They don't need my money. That must make you proud. It makes me grateful. I raised them alone after Eleanor died. They could have ended up anywhere. Instead, they ended up good. James clicked his pen. My wife is gone. My kids are set. I'm selling my land this year. All 2,000 acres. Already have a buyer. $8 million. Karen's jaw dropped. After taxes and expenses, I'll net about $6.2 million. And you want to spend $500,000 on tractors? I want to spend it on farmers. Karen shook her head. I don't understand. The 12 tractors I'm buying today aren't for me. They're for 12 young farmers who can't afford equipment. Kids like I was in 1968. People the banks won't touch because they don't have credit history or collateral. Good people who just need a chance. You're buying tractors for strangers? Not strangers, not exactly. I've spent the last 2 years identifying them, researching them, making sure they're serious, hardworking, honest. These are people who will succeed if someone just gives them the opportunity. James wrote a number on a piece of paper, slid it across the desk. Karen looked at it. $4 million. $4 million? The Walter Price Agricultural Foundation, named after the only man who helped me when I needed it most. This foundation will help young farmers for decades after I'm gone. Karen stared at James Wilson, at his dirty boots and stained jacket, at his calm, patient eyes, at the plain green checkbook that held more money than she would earn in 50 lifetimes. Mr. Wilson, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just sell me the tractors. Karen looked at the check on her desk. $162,400. The largest single transaction of her career. And apparently, it was just the beginning. I can have those 4 delivered to your farm by end of day, she said. The other 8, I'll need to source them. 2 weeks, maybe 3. That works. And the foundation. If you need help setting it up, connecting with other dealers, finding equipment. I might take you up on that. Karen stood, extended her hand. Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology, a real one, not the kind I offered before. I looked at you and made assumptions. I laughed at you. That was wrong. James shook her hand. His grip was firm, warm. You're not the first, he said. Won't be the last. But maybe next time someone walks through that door looking like they can't afford anything, you'll remember this conversation. I will. I promise. James turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Yes? My wife Eleanor used to say something. The richest man in the room is usually the one nobody notices. I've tried to live by that. He adjusted his worn John Deere cap. Because when you're truly wealthy, you don't need anyone to know. You just need to use it right. James Wilson walked out of Stevens' John Deere dealership. Karen Mitchell stood at her desk, holding a check for $162,400, wondering how many other fortunes she had laughed away over the past 15 years. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a question formed that would haunt her for the rest of her career. How many James Wilsons had walked through that door before? And how many had she turned away? The 4 tractors were delivered that afternoon. Paul Harrison, the dealership owner, personally drove one of them. He had been in the back office when James Wilson walked out, but Karen had told him everything. Every word, every detail, every moment of her humiliation. Paul had sold John Deere equipment for 32 years. He had visited hundreds of farms across Marshall County. He thought he knew every serious operation within 50 miles of Marshalltown. He had never heard of James Wilson, and that bothered him. So he loaded the 1984 4440 onto the flatbed trailer himself, told his drivers to follow, and headed south toward the address on James Wilson's check. The driveway was a quarter-mile of gravel, rutted from decades of heavy equipment. Paul drove slowly, the tractor rumbling behind him on the trailer. 2 other delivery trucks followed. The farmhouse appeared first. Small, white, built sometime in the 1960s. Nothing fancy. A porch with 2 wooden chairs, windows that needed painting. The kind of house a struggling farmer might live in. But then Paul saw the sheds. 7 of them. Massive pole buildings spread across the property. All well-maintained, all with fresh metal roofing. Paul had been in this business long enough to know what good infrastructure cost. James Wilson was waiting in the yard. Same dirty boots, same stained jacket, same calm expression. "Mr. Harrison," James said, "appreciate you delivering personally." Paul climbed down from his truck. "Wanted to see your operation. Hope you don't mind." "Not at all, though there's not much to see." Paul looked around. 2,000 acres of flat Iowa farmland stretched in every direction. Corn stubble from last year's harvest, black soil that farmers would kill for. "This is all yours?" "Every acre." "And you farm it yourself?" "Got some help during planting and harvest, but mostly, yes." Paul walked toward the nearest shed. James followed. Didn't try to stop him. "Mind if I look inside?" "Go ahead." Paul slid the massive door open, stopped, stared. 17 tractors, all John Deere, all lined up in perfect rows, all gleaming like they had just rolled off the factory floor. "Jesus Christ," Paul whispered. "Language, Mr. Harrison." "Sorry, Paul walked into the shed, ran his hand along the hood of a 1976 4430. "This is incredible. You have 17 tractors?" 18 now, with the one you just delivered. "But you said you only farm 2,000 acres. You don't need 18 tractors for that." "I don't need them for farming." Paul turned. "Then what are they for?" James leaned against the doorframe. "They're for young farmers who can't afford them." "I don't understand." "Let me show you something." James led Paul to a small office in the corner of the shed. Inside was a filing cabinet, a desk, and a wall covered with photographs. Paul stepped closer. The photos showed young men and women standing next to tractors. Different faces, different years, but all of them had the same expression. Hope. "Who are these people?" Paul asked. "Farmers I've helped. 32 of them over the past 20 years. Paul studied the photos. Some were clearly from the 1990s, based on the clothing and hair. Others looked more recent. This one here, James pointed to a photo of a young Asian man standing next to a 4430. "That's Michael Chen. First farmer I ever helped. 1990. He came to me because no bank would give him a loan. 26 years old. Wanted to farm, but had no credit history, no collateral, no chance. What did you do? Sold him that tractor for $12,000. Same price I paid for it at auction in 1984. Put him on a payment plan. $1,000 down, $200 a month for 5 years. 0 interest. Paul did the math. That's only $13,000 total. You could have sold it for twice that. Could have. Didn't want to. Why not? James pulled the photo off the wall, looked at it like he was remembering something precious. Because in 1979, when my wife had been dead for 4 years, and I was trying to raise 3 kids alone, Walter Price showed up at my door. Helped me plant my crops. Never asked for anything in return. Just said, "Neighbors help neighbors, James. That's how we survive." James put the photo back. Walter lost his farm that same year. Couldn't pay his debts. I watched him lose everything. And I decided that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way Walter helped me, I would take it. Paul was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What happened to Michael Chen?" "Let me show you." James walked to his desk, pulled out a thick folder, handed it to Paul. Michael started with 180 rented acres in 1990. By 1995, he owned 240 acres. By 2000, he owned 480. Today, he owns 640 acres, free and clear. Net worth somewhere around $2.8 million. Paul flipped through the folder. Financial statements, land records, photos of Michael's operation over the years. "You kept track of them?" "I keep track of all of them. Every farmer I've ever helped." James pulled out another folder, then another, then another. Jennifer Walsh. Sold her a tractor in 1994. She now owns 560 acres. David Rodriguez. Gave him a tractor for free in 1997 because his father had lost their family farm and David had nothing. He now owns 480 acres. Thomas Murphy. His father killed himself after losing their farm in 2004. I gave Thomas a tractor in 2008. He now runs a successful livestock operation on 320 acres. Paul sat down. The folders were heavy in his hands. "You've been doing this for 20 years, quietly, without anyone knowing." "Why would anyone need to know?" "Because this is..." Paul searched for the word. "This is incredible. You've changed these people's lives." "I gave them tractors. They changed their own lives." "But the cost. You must have given away hundreds of thousands of dollars." "About $2 million if you count the below-market sales and the zero-interest financing." $2 million? Money I didn't need. Money that was just sitting in a bank. Money that could actually do something if I put it in the right hands. Paul walked back to the wall of photos, studied each face. Young men and women from different backgrounds. White, black, Hispanic, Asian. All of them had started with nothing. All of them had ended up with something. "How do you choose them?" Paul asked. "Carefully. I spend time getting to know them. Watch how they work. Talk to their neighbors, their former employers, anyone who can tell me about their character. What are you looking for?" Same thing Walter saw in me. Someone who will work hard enough to deserve the chance. Someone who won't give up when things get difficult. Someone who will eventually help others the way they were helped. James pointed to a photo near the bottom of the wall. A young black woman holding hands with a small child, standing in front of a worn-down 4440. That's Lisa Washington. Single mother, 3 kids. Worked 2 jobs while taking agricultural classes at the community college. Came to me in 2005 with $800 in savings and a dream of farming. What did you do? gave her a tractor worth $34,000. Free. No payments, no strings. Just told her to work hard and help someone else when she could afford to. And now? She owns 280 acres. Put her oldest daughter through college. Her daughter is studying agricultural finance at Iowa State. Wants to help young farmers get loans. Paul felt something tighten in his chest. He had spent 32 years selling equipment to farmers. He had made millions in commissions. He had never once stopped to think about the farmers who couldn't afford what he was selling. "Mr. Wilson, I have to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Why? Why do all of this? You could have bought a yacht, traveled the world, done anything you wanted with this money." James was quiet for a long moment. "When Eleanor died, I was 32 years old, with 3 children under the age of 6. My family wanted me to give up, move back to Alabama, let someone else raise my kids, let someone else deal with the farm." He turned back to Paul. "But Eleanor made me promise. In those last 15 minutes while she was holding our daughter, she made me promise that I wouldn't give up, that I wouldn't let anyone tell me I couldn't do it, that I would prove every single person wrong." James's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. "I spent the next 40 years doing exactly that, proving them wrong. But somewhere along the way, I realized that wasn't enough. Proving people wrong is about you. Helping people succeed is about something bigger." "What do you mean?" "Every tractor I give away, every farmer I help, that's Eleanor's legacy. That's me keeping my promise to her. Every time one of these young people succeeds, Eleanor wins. And every time one of them helps someone else, Eleanor wins again." Paul didn't know what to say. He had come here expecting to see a farm. He had found something else entirely. "The 12 tractors you're buying," Paul said, "they're for new farmers?" 12 young people I've been watching for the past 2 years. All of them ready. All of them deserving. All of them stuck because nobody will give them a chance." "And you're going to give them that chance?" "I'm going to give them equipment. The chance is something they'll have to earn themselves." Paul followed James out of the shed. They walked past the other buildings, past rows of equipment that James had accumulated over decades, past the modest farmhouse where he had raised 3 children alone. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long have you been in this business?" 32 years. "In 32 years, how many young farmers have come to you needing equipment they couldn't afford?" Paul thought about it. The answer was uncomfortable. "Hundreds, maybe thousands." "And how many of them did you help?" Paul didn't answer, because the answer was none. Not really. He had helped them fill out loan applications, helped them find financing with acceptable interest rates. But he had never once reached into his own pocket, never once taken a risk on someone who couldn't pay. "I'm not judging you," James said. "You're a businessman. You did your job. But there's a difference between doing your job and changing someone's life." "I see that now." They reached the main yard. The delivery trucks were waiting. 3 tractors still on trailers, ready to be unloaded. "Where do you want them?" Paul asked. "Shed number 4. I'll show your drivers." As they walked, Paul noticed something else. A memorial stone near the farmhouse. Simple granite, weathered from years of Iowa winters. Eleanor Marie Wilson, 1945 to 1975. Beloved wife and mother. She believed when no one else did. "My kids wanted to bury her in the cemetery in town," James said, following Paul's gaze. "But Eleanor always said she wanted to be here, on the land we built together, where she could watch over us." That's beautiful. That's Eleanor. Everything beautiful in my life started with her. The tractors were unloaded and positioned in Shed 4. Paul's drivers headed back to the dealership, but Paul stayed. "Mr. Harrison, you don't have to hang around. I know you're busy." "Actually, I was hoping you might tell me more about the 12 farmers you're planning to help." James studied him. "Why?" "Because I think I've been doing this wrong. For 32 years, I've been selling equipment to people who could already afford it. Maybe it's time I started thinking about the people who can't." James smiled, the first real smile Paul had seen from him. "Come inside. I'll make coffee, and I'll introduce you to the people whose lives are about to change." They walked toward the farmhouse, past Eleanor's memorial, past the sheds full of tractors waiting for owners, past everything James had built over a lifetime of patience and discipline. The kitchen was small but clean. James put on a pot of coffee, pulled out a folder from a drawer. "Sarah Jenkins," he said, sliding a photograph across the table. 29 years old, former schoolteacher, saved $22,000 over 6 years, wants to farm more than anything in the world, but equipment financing requires income of at least $45,000 a year. She makes $38,000. Paul looked at the photo. Young black woman with determined eyes, standing in a field like she already owned it. "What are you giving her?" "The 1979 4440, worth $39,000. She's getting it free." "Free? No payment at all?" "None. Sarah reminds me of myself. Single, struggling, but absolutely certain that farming is what she's supposed to do. I'm not going to put a payment between her and her dream." James slid another photo across the table. David Rodriguez, 33 years old. Father lost their family farm in 2003. David has been saving for 8 years, has $23,000. Not enough for a decent tractor, not enough to get started. What's he getting? The 1984 4640, worth $44,000. He'll pay cost over 5 years, 0 interest, $300 a month. Total payback, $18,000. Less than half what the tractor is worth. And he can afford $300 a month? He'll have to, but he's hungry. He'll find a way. Photo after photo, story after story. 12 young farmers who had been failed by a system designed for people who already had money. Thomas Murphy, whose father's suicide had almost destroyed him, getting a free tractor worth $41,000. Jennifer Kowalski, daughter of Polish immigrants, first in her family to want to farm in America, getting a tractor at cost with 0 interest terms. Marcus Washington, no relation to Lisa, who had grown up in Chicago and discovered farming through a summer job at age 16, getting a free tractor because James saw himself in the young man's determination. 12 stories, 12 chances, 12 tractors that would change everything. "Mr. Wilson, how did you find all these people?" "Same way Walter found me. Paid attention, asked questions, showed up when nobody else would." "But you must have talked to dozens of people to find these 12. "Hundreds, over 2 years. Most of them weren't ready. Some of them weren't serious. A few of them were dishonest. But these 12, James tapped the stack of photos, these 12 are the real thing." Paul finished his coffee, set down the cup. "I want to help." "Excuse me?" "I want to help. With the foundation, with finding equipment, with whatever you need." James leaned back. "Why?" "Because you're right. I've spent 32 years doing business. Now I want to spend whatever time I have left doing something that matters." That's a big change. "I'm 61 years old, Mr. Wilson. If not now, when?" James extended his hand. Paul shook it. "Welcome to the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation. Walter Price. Walter's middle name was Walter. His mother's maiden name was Price. Seemed fitting to name the foundation after him. He's the reason any of this exists. Paul helped James organize the delivery schedule for the 12 tractors. Some would go out immediately. Others would wait until the remaining 8 were sourced. The first delivery was scheduled for the following Monday. Sarah Jenkins, the school teacher who dreamed of farming. "You want to come along?" James asked. "I wouldn't miss it." "Good, because I want you to see what happens when you give someone a chance they never expected." Paul drove home that evening with his head spinning. He had walked into James Wilson's property expecting to see a simple farm. He had left with a completely new understanding of what wealth could do. Not yachts, not vacations, not fancy cars. Tractors. For people who needed them. Given away by a man in dirty boots who had never needed anyone to know he was rich. Eleanor Wilson's words echoed in Paul's mind as he drove. The richest man in the room is usually the one nobody notices. James Wilson had been invisible to everyone in Marshall County. Just another old black farmer in worn clothes and a beat-up truck. Nobody knew he owned 2,000 acres free and clear. Nobody knew he had $2.3 million in his checking account. Nobody knew he had already changed 32 lives and was about to change 12 more. That was exactly how James wanted it. Because when you're truly wealthy, you don't need anyone to know. You just need to use it right. Monday morning came faster than Paul expected. He pulled into James Wilson's driveway at 7 sharp, coffee in hand, nerves he couldn't explain. James was already waiting by the shed. Same boots, same jacket, same calm expression that never seemed to change. "You're early," James said. "Couldn't sleep." "Nervous?" "A little. Is that strange?" James smiled. "No. I felt the same way the first time I did this. Back in 1990, when I drove that tractor to Michael Chen's place, hands were shaking the whole way." "What were you nervous about?" "That I was doing the wrong thing, that I was wasting money, that Michael would fail and I'd have thrown away everything for nothing." "But he didn't fail." "No, he didn't." They loaded the 1979 4440 onto the trailer. 41 years old, that tractor, but it ran like it was new. James had spent 3 months refurbishing it. New tires, engine rebuild, fresh paint. Every detail perfect. "Sarah doesn't know we're coming," James said as they pulled out of the driveway. "I told her I wanted to talk about farming opportunities. Didn't tell her what I was bringing." "Why not?" "Because I want to see her face when she understands." They drove south for 20 minutes, past fields of corn stubble, past farmhouses that had seen better days, past the kind of rural Iowa that most people never noticed. Sarah Jenkins lived in a rented house at the edge of a small town called Gilman. Population 497. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and opportunity was something that happened somewhere else. Her car was in the driveway, a 2003 Honda Civic with rust on the fenders and 180,000 miles on the odometer. "Wait here," James said. "Let me talk to her first." Paul watched from the truck as James walked to the front door, knocked, waited. The door opened. Sarah Jenkins looked exactly like her photograph. Young, determined, a little tired around the eyes. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, like she had been expecting to work. "Mr. Wilson, I thought you weren't coming until this afternoon." "Changed plans. Mind if we talk outside?" "Sure, I guess. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Better than fine." They walked toward the truck. Sarah saw Paul behind the wheel, saw the trailer behind the truck, saw the green and yellow of the John Deere tractor gleaming in the morning sun. She stopped. "Mr. Wilson, what is that?" "That's a 1979 John Deere 4440, one of the best tractors ever made." "I know what it is. I mean, why is it here?" James reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, handed it to Sarah. "Open it." Sarah's hands were trembling as she tore the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a title transfer. Her name was already filled in. "I don't understand." "That tractor is yours, Sarah. Free and clear. No payments, no conditions. Yours." Sarah stared at the paper, stared at the tractor, stared at James.
"This is worth—"
She couldn't finish the sentence. "About $39,000. More than you make in a year teaching."
"I can't accept this."
"Yes, you can."
"Mr. Wilson, this is too much. I barely know you. We've only talked 3 times.
4 times. And that's enough." Sarah's eyes were filling with tears. She was fighting them, trying to stay composed, but losing the battle. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" James took a step closer. His voice was gentle, the voice of a father, the voice of someone who understood. "Because 40 years ago, I was you, single, struggling, wanting to farm more than anything in the world, and somebody helped me when nobody else would. But I didn't ask for help. The people who deserve help rarely do." The tears broke free. Sarah covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. Paul felt his own eyes stinging. "My daddy farmed," Sarah said through her tears. 20 acres outside Birmingham. Lost it all in 1992. Bank took everything. He never recovered. Died 3 years later with nothing. "I know." Sarah lowered her hands. "You know?" "I know everything, Sarah. I know your father was Marcus Jenkins. I know he lost his farm to First Alabama Savings during the crisis. I know you were 14 years old when they took his land. I know you've been trying to get back to farming ever since." "How do you know all that?" "Because I do my research. Before I help someone, I learn their story. I need to know they're serious. I need to know they'll succeed." "And you think I'll succeed?" "I know you will. Because you have something that can't be taught. You have hunger. The same hunger I had when I was 32 years old with 3 children and a dead wife and everyone telling me I should give up." Sarah wiped her eyes, looked at the tractor again. "Mr. Wilson, I don't know how to thank you. You thank me by succeeding. You thank me by helping someone else when you're able. That's the only payment I want." Paul got out of the truck, helped James unload the tractor, showed Sarah the basic controls, though she already knew them from her agricultural classes. When the tractor was on the ground, Sarah climbed into the seat, just sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes closed. "What are you doing?" James asked. "Praying, thanking God for you, telling my daddy that his daughter is finally going to farm." They left Sarah Jenkins with a tractor worth more than her annual salary. By the time they reached the main road, Paul had to pull over. "You okay?" James asked. "I've been selling equipment for 32 years. I've never felt anything like that." "That's because you've never given anyone anything. You've only sold." "What's the difference?" "Selling is a transaction. Giving is a relationship. Sarah Jenkins will remember this day for the rest of her life. Every time she sits on that tractor, she'll remember that someone believed in her." Paul wiped his face, started driving again. "How many more deliveries today?" 2 more. David Rodriguez this afternoon, Thomas Murphy tomorrow." David Rodriguez lived in a small apartment complex in Marshalltown. Third floor. No elevator. Paul couldn't imagine how a man who wanted a farm ended up in a place like this, James explained on the way. David's father lost their farm in 2003. David was 19. Watched his father fall apart. The shame, the depression, the feeling of complete failure. David's father never recovered. What happened to him? Started drinking, lost his marriage, lost everything. Died in 2008. Liver failure. David was with him at the end. That's terrible. It's common. More farmers die from suicide and alcohol than most people know. The shame of losing a farm, of failing at something your family has done for generations, it destroys people. But David wants to farm anyway? David wants to redeem his father's name, wants to prove that the Rodriguez family can succeed, that his father's failure wasn't the end of the story. They parked outside the apartment complex. James called David's phone. "David, it's James Wilson. I'm downstairs. Can you come outside?" "Mr. Wilson, is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just come outside. Bring your jacket. We're going for a drive." David Rodriguez appeared 3 minutes later. 33 years old, strong build, hands that had done hard work, eyes that had seen too much loss. "Mr. Wilson, what's going on?" "Get in the truck." David climbed into the back seat, noticed Paul, noticed the trailer behind them. "Is that a tractor?" "A 1980 John Deere 4640, one of the best utility tractors ever made." "Why do you have a tractor on a trailer?" "Because I'm delivering it to its new owner." They drove in silence for 10 minutes. David kept looking at the tractor in the rear-view mirror. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "Mr. Wilson, I've been saving for 8 years. I have $23,000. That's not enough for a tractor like that. Not even close." "You're right. That tractor is worth $44,000. "Then why are you showing it to me?" James turned in his seat, looked at David directly. "How much can you afford to pay per month? If you were making payments on a tractor, what could you afford?" David thought about it. "Maybe 300? Maybe 350 if I picked up extra shifts." "Then here's my offer. That tractor is yours. 300 a month for 5 years. 0 interest. Total payback, $18,000. David's face went blank, like his brain couldn't process what he was hearing. "You're selling me a $44,000 tractor for $18,000? "I'm giving you a chance your father never got. The banks destroyed him. They're not going to destroy you." "Mr. Wilson, David stopped, swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." "Yes! God, yes! Of course, yes!" They drove to a farm outside of town. 200 acres that David had been renting for seasonal work. The owner, an elderly man named Frank, was waiting. "Frank knows you're serious," James said. "He's agreed to give you first right to purchase if he ever sells. 200 acres to start. More when you're ready." David climbed out of the truck, walked toward the tractor like he was approaching something sacred. "My father had a 4640, he said quietly. "Blue, 1982 model. I used to ride with him in the cab when I was a kid. He'd let me steer sometimes. Said I was a natural." "I know. That's why I chose this model for you." David touched the hood, ran his fingers along the John Deere logo. "The day the bank took his tractor, I came home from school and he was sitting on the porch. Just sitting there, staring at nothing. I asked him what was wrong and he said, 'They took it, David. They took everything.' That's not going to happen to you." "How do you know?" "Because you're not carrying debt you can't afford. Because you're starting small and smart. Because you've learned from your father's mistakes, instead of repeating them. David turned, grabbed James in a hug so fierce that Paul thought the old man might break. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You're welcome. Now let go before you crack my ribs." David laughed, the first genuine laugh Paul had heard from him. "When do I start payments?" "First payment is due in 6 months. I want you to have time to get established before you worry about money." 6 months? That's too generous." "It's not generous. It's practical. I don't want your money, David. I want your success. If you fail because I rushed you into payments, what good does that do anyone?" They left David Rodriguez standing next to his new tractor, calling his mother to tell her the news. Paul could hear her crying through the phone from 20 feet away. 2 down, James said as they drove back toward town. 10 to go. "How do you do this without falling apart?" "Who says I don't fall apart?" Paul looked at James, really looked at him, saw the moisture in the old man's eyes, saw the slight tremble in his hands. "Every single delivery," James said, "I think about Eleanor. About what she would say if she could see this. About whether I'm doing it right." "You're doing it right." "I hope so. I really hope so." The next morning, they delivered a tractor to Thomas Murphy. Thomas was different from the others, harder, angrier. He had built walls around himself that even James's kindness couldn't easily penetrate. They found him working at an oil field equipment yard outside of Marshalltown. Dirty job. Dangerous job. The kind of job men took when they had no other options. "Thomas Murphy?" Thomas looked up from the machine he was cleaning, wiped grease from his hands with a rag. "Who's asking?" "James Wilson. We spoke on the phone a few months ago." "I remember. You asked a lot of questions about my family." "I did. Mind if we talk privately?" Thomas looked at James, then at Paul, then at the trailer with the tractor on it. "I've got 15 minutes for lunch. That's all." They walked away from the other workers. Paul stayed by the truck, watching. "Your father was Robert Murphy," James said. "Farmed 340 acres north of Des Moines. Lost everything in 2004. Thomas's jaw tightened. "I know my own history." He took his own life 6 months later. "What's your point?" "My point is that I understand. My wife died when I was 32. Different kind of loss, but loss all the same. The kind that makes you want to give up, makes you want to stop fighting." "I haven't given up." "No, you haven't. That's why I'm here." James pointed to the trailer, to the 1981 4440 gleaming in the sun. "That tractor is yours. Free. No payments, no conditions." Thomas stared. His face went through 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, suspicion, anger, hope, fear, and finally something that looked like grief. "Why?" "Because you deserve a chance your father never got."
You don't know anything about my father.
"I know he was a good man who got caught in bad circumstances. I know the banks pressured him until he broke. I know he loved you enough to feel ashamed that he couldn't provide for you."
Stop!
I know his suicide wasn't about weakness. It was about a system that chews up good people and spits them out.
I said stop!
Thomas's voice cracked. He turned away. His shoulders were shaking.
"I was 18 when he died,"
Thomas said, his voice barely audible.
"Found him in the barn. He left a note. Said he was sorry. Said he hoped I'd forgive him someday."
"Have you?"
"I don't know. I'm still angry. Angry at him. Angry at the banks. Angry at everyone who let this happen."
"That anger is going to help you."
Thomas turned back. "What?"
"The anger. Use it.
Let it drive you, but don't let it destroy you the way the shame destroyed your father. Channel it into building something, into proving everyone wrong.
James handed Thomas an envelope. Same as the others. Title transfer. Thomas's name already filled in. I don't want your charity. This isn't charity. This is an investment. I'm betting that you're going to take this tractor and build something your father would be proud of. I'm betting that 10 years from now, you'll be successful enough to help someone else the way I'm helping you. And if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you'll have tried. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. Thomas looked at the envelope, at the tractor, at James. My father used to talk about legacy, about building something that would last. He wanted me to take over the farm someday, carry on what his grandfather started. You can still do that. Different farm, same dream. Thomas's hands were shaking as he opened the envelope, read the title transfer. This tractor is worth over $40,000. $41,200 to be exact. And you're just giving it to me? I'm giving you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. Thomas Murphy didn't hug James, didn't cry, didn't say thank you. He just nodded once, put the envelope in his pocket, and walked back toward the tractor. He climbed into the cab, started the engine, sat there with his hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. He's not okay, Paul said quietly. No, he's not. But he will be. How do you know? Because the angry ones are always the most determined. Thomas Murphy is going to build an empire, just to prove the world wrong, just to honor his father's memory, just to show everyone that the Murphy family doesn't quit. They left Thomas at the equipment yard. He had arranged to store the tractor at a nearby farm until he could afford to rent land of his own. Over the next 12 days, they delivered the remaining tractors. Each delivery was different. Each story was unique. But the reaction was always the same. Shock, disbelief, tears, gratitude. Jennifer Kowalski, daughter of Polish immigrants, fell to her knees and prayed in Polish while her mother wept beside her. Marcus Washington, the young man from Chicago, called his grandmother, who had always told him he was meant for something bigger than city life. Lisa Chen, Michael Chen's cousin, received the same model that Michael had started with in 1990. Full circle. 12 tractors, 12 farmers, 12 lives changed forever. On the final delivery day, James and Paul sat on James's porch. The sun was setting over 2,000 acres of paid-off farmland. The sheds were emptier now. 12 fewer tractors. 12 more dreams in motion. "It's done," James said. "How do you feel?" "Tired, happy, scared." "Scared of what?" "That I didn't do enough. That I should have helped more people. That I wasted too much time accumulating when I should have been giving." "You've given away over $500,000 in tractors in the last 2 weeks. And I still have millions left. What good does money in a bank do for anyone?" Paul thought about his own savings, his retirement account, his investment portfolio. Money sitting in computers somewhere, doing nothing. "The foundation," Paul said. "You said you're putting in $4 million? The Walter Price Agricultural Foundation, named after Walter. It'll be official in August." "What will it do?" "Same thing I've been doing for 20 years. Find young farmers who need equipment. Provide tractors at cost or below cost. Zero interest financing. Give people chances the banks won't." "And it'll run forever?" "That's the plan. Conservative investments should generate $150,000 to $200,000 per year, enough to help 3 or 4 farmers annually. Long after I'm gone,
Young people will still be getting equipment they couldn't otherwise afford. Paul looked at James, at his worn boots and stained jacket, at his calm, patient face.
Mr. Wilson, I want to contribute to the foundation. I want to put money in. I want to be part of this. James studied him. How much? I don't know yet. Let me talk to my accountant. But something significant. Something that matters. Why? Because you've shown me what money is actually for. Not boats, not vacations, not fancy cars. This. Exactly this. James extended his hand. Paul shook it. Welcome to the family, Paul Harrison. August 15th, 2011. The Walter Price Agricultural Foundation officially launched. James had rented a community hall in Marshalltown. Nothing fancy. Folding chairs, a podium, coffee and donuts in the back. He had invited everyone he had ever helped, everyone who had ever helped him, and a few local reporters who had gotten wind of the story. Paul arrived early to help set up. Found James already there, wearing the same boots and jacket he always wore. You could have dressed up, Paul said. It's your big day. These are my clothes.
Why would I wear something different?
Because there are going to be pictures. This is going to be in the newspaper. Good. Let them see me as I am. That's the whole point. The hall filled slowly. First came the 12 farmers James had helped in March. Sarah Jenkins arrived with her mother. David Rodriguez brought his entire family. Thomas Murphy came alone, stood in the back, arms crossed. Then came the others. The 32 farmers James had helped over the previous 20 years. Michael Chen flew in from California. Jennifer Walsh drove 6 hours from Minnesota. Lisa Washington brought all 3 of her children. By noon, there were over 100 people in the room. Farmers, families, friends, all connected by one man in dirty boots who had spent 40 years quietly changing lives. James walked to the podium. The room went silent. I'm not good at speeches, he began. Never have been. So I'll keep this short. He pulled a photograph from his pocket, held it up. This is Eleanor, my wife. She died in 1975, giving birth to our daughter, Tanya. She was 30 years old. The room was absolutely still. Before she died, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let them give up on you, James, and don't you give up on them." She was talking about our children, but I've come to believe she was talking about something bigger. James set the photograph on the podium. In 1979, a man named Walter Price saved my life. Not literally, but he might as well have. I was a black, single father in rural Iowa, with 3 kids and a farm I could barely manage. Walter was the only person who helped. He showed up every morning for 3 weeks and helped me plant my crops. Never asked for anything. Just said, "Neighbors help neighbors, James. That's how we survive." James paused, collected himself. Walter lost his farm that same year. Bank foreclosed. I watched them auction off everything he owned, and I decided that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way Walter helped me, I would take it. He looked around the room, at the farmers he had helped, at their families, at the children who existed because their parents had been given a chance. Over the past 30 years, I've helped 44 farmers. Some of you are in this room. Some of you have helped others who helped others who helped others. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how Walter would have wanted it. James pulled out a document, held it up. This is the charter for the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation, named after Walter. The foundation has an endowment of $4 million. It will provide equipment to young farmers who can't get conventional financing. Zero interest, zero profit, just opportunity. The room erupted in applause. James waited for it to die down. I'm 68 years old. I won't be around forever. But this foundation will be. Long after I'm gone, young farmers will still be getting tractors they couldn't otherwise afford. Long after everyone forgets my name, Walter's legacy will keep multiplying. James looked directly at the 12 farmers from March. Sarah, David, Thomas, all of you. You're the next generation. When you succeed, and you will succeed, I want you to help someone else. Find a young farmer who needs a chance. Give them what I gave you. That's the only payment I want. Sarah was crying. David was crying. Even Thomas, standing rigid in the back, had moisture in his eyes. One more thing, James said. My wife Eleanor used to say, the richest man in the room is usually the one nobody notices. I've tried to live by that. Money doesn't mean anything unless you use it for something bigger than yourself. He picked up Eleanor's photograph, looked at it. I hope I made you proud, baby. I hope this is what you meant. James stepped away from the podium. The applause was thunderous. People stood, people cheered, people cried. Michael Chen was the first to reach James, grabbed him in a hug that lasted nearly a minute. 21 years ago, you gave me a tractor, Michael said. You changed my life. You changed my family's life. You changed the lives of 19 farmers I've helped since then. You did the work, Michael. I just gave you a tool. You gave me hope. That's worth more than any tractor. One by one, the farmers came to James, shook his hand, hugged him, thanked him, told him stories he had never heard. Jennifer Walsh told him about her daughter who was studying agricultural finance. She wants to start a lending program for women farmers. Says she's going to do what you did, but bigger. Lisa Washington introduced her children. The oldest, a college sophomore, shook James's hand firmly. Mr. Wilson, because of you, my mama could afford to keep us together. We never went hungry. We always had a home. I'm going to be a farmer like her, and I'm going to help people like you helped us. David Rodriguez brought his mother to meet James. She was a small woman in her 60s, quiet, holding back tears. My husband lost everything, she said in Spanish-accented English. It killed him. Not right away, but it killed him. I thought I would lose David too. Thought the shame would destroy him like it destroyed his father. She grabbed James's hands. You gave him back to me. You gave my son a reason to live. I don't have words for that. I don't have enough thank yous. Your son did the work, James said. I just gave him a chance. A chance nobody else would give. The bank said no. The government said no. Everyone said no. You said yes. Thomas Murphy approached last. He stood in front of James for a long moment. Didn't speak. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. Then he reached out and shook James's hand. I'm going to make it, Thomas said. For my father. For you. For everyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough. I know you are. And when I do, when I have enough, I'm going to help someone else. Someone like me. Someone angry. Someone who needs to prove the world wrong. That's all I ask. Thomas nodded once, turned, walked away. Paul watched from the corner, overwhelmed by what he was seeing. 100 people connected by one man's generosity. A network of farmers helping farmers, stretching back 30 years and forward into infinity. You okay? James asked, appearing beside him.
I've been in this business 32 years. I thought I understood agriculture. I didn't understand anything. You're learning. I want to contribute more to the foundation. I talked to my accountant. I can put in $250,000. James's eyebrows rose. That's generous. It's not generous. It's overdue. I've made millions selling equipment to people who could afford it.
It's time I did something for the people who couldn't. The foundation accepts donations. Good. Consider it accepted. The newspaper article ran the following week. Local farmer launches foundation to help young agricultural workers. The story included James's photo. Same boots, same jacket, same calm expression. The phones started ringing immediately. Mr. Wilson, my name is Jason Williams. I read about your foundation. I'm 24 years old, trying to start a farm. Can't get financing anywhere. Mr. Wilson, I'm calling from Nebraska. My son wants to farm, but we can't afford equipment. Is there any way you can help? Mr. Wilson, this is Patricia Nguyen from the Des Moines Register. We'd like to do a feature story on your foundation. James answered every call, talked to every person, took notes on every potential farmer. The foundation had barely launched, and already there were more requests than he could handle. This is good, Paul said. This means it's working. This is overwhelming. There are so many people who need help. You can't help everyone. I know, but I want to. 3 months passed. Summer came to Iowa with its relentless heat and endless rows of growing corn. The 12 farmers James had helped were scattered across 4 counties, each one working land they had once only dreamed of touching. Paul visited them when he could, drove out on weekends to check on their progress, brought supplies sometimes, advice other times. Mostly, he just wanted to see what James Wilson's investment was producing. Sarah Jenkins was the first one he visited regularly. Her 140 rented acres were planted with soybeans, a safer crop for a first-year farmer. She worked 16-hour days without complaint. The 1979 4440 James had given her ran perfectly. "How's it going?" Paul asked one July evening, finding Sarah covered in dust and sweat. "Hard. Harder than I thought." "Regretting it?" Sarah laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from exhaustion and joy mixed together. "Not for 1 second. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." "James will be happy to hear that." "How is he?" "Busy. The foundation launches officially next month. He's been meeting with lawyers and accountants every day." "I want to be there, at the launch, whatever ceremony he's having." "I'll let him know." David Rodriguez was doing well too. His 200 rented acres were planted with corn. He had already made arrangements to expand next year. The $300 monthly payments to James were being made early, every single month. "I want to pay it off faster," David told Paul during a visit. "I know Mr. Wilson said 5 years, but I can do it in 3 if I push." "Why the rush?" "Because every month I owe him money is a month I'm not free. And because the sooner I pay it off, the sooner I can help someone else." "Help someone else?" "That's what Mr. Wilson asked me to do. Said when I'm successful enough, I should find a young farmer and do for them what he did for me. Pass it on." Paul nodded. This was James's real legacy. Not just the tractors, not just the money. The idea that help was supposed to multiply. Thomas Murphy was the hardest to track. He had quit his oil field job 2 weeks after receiving his tractor. Found 180 acres to rent south of Des Moines. Rarely answered his phone. Rarely talked to anyone. Paul drove out to find him in late July. Thomas was in his field, shirtless, digging a drainage ditch by hand. "You know they make machines for that," Paul said. Thomas didn't stop digging. "Machines cost money. James would help if you asked." "I'm not asking for anything else,"
He gave me enough. Paul watched Thomas work. The young man moved with a fury that was almost frightening. Every shovel of dirt was thrown like he was angry at it. "You okay, Thomas?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Thomas stopped,
Drove the shovel into the ground, turned to face Paul with sweat dripping down his face. "You want to know if I'm okay? I'm working 18 hours a day on land I don't own, with a tractor I didn't pay for, trying to build something from nothing, while everyone waits for me to fail, just like my father did. Nobody wants you to fail. Everybody wants me to fail. You know what people say when they hear about me? They say, 'Murphy kid's trying to farm. Give it a year.' They're all waiting, watching, expecting me to end up like him. And what are you going to do about it?" Thomas grabbed the shovel again, started digging with even more intensity. "I'm going to prove every single one of them wrong. I'm going to build something so big that nobody will ever forget the name Murphy. And when I'm done, I'm going to find every person who doubted me and make sure they know I remember." Paul left Thomas to his digging, drove to James's farm to report what he had seen. "He's angry," Paul said. "I know. Really angry. The kind of angry that might be dangerous." James shook his head. "The kind of angry that makes empires. Thomas Murphy is going to be the most successful farmer I've ever helped. Mark my words." 7 years passed. 7 years of tractors delivered. 7 years of young farmers helped. 7 years of the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation growing beyond anything James Wilson had imagined. By January 2019, the foundation had assisted 47 farmers across Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, and South Dakota. The endowment had grown to $6.2 million through conservative investments and donations from people who had heard James's story and wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. Paul Harrison had retired from the dealership in 2018, sold his stake to his nephew. Now he spent his days volunteering with the foundation, driving across the Midwest to evaluate potential candidates, delivering tractors to people who reminded him of that March morning when everything changed. The 12 farmers from 2011 had all succeeded, every single one. Sarah Jenkins owned 380 acres free and clear. Her soybean operation was one of the most profitable in Marshall County. She had helped 3 young women start farming, providing mentorship and occasionally co-signing loans. David Rodriguez had paid off his tractor in 3 years instead of 5. He now owned 480 acres and had just purchased his second combine. His mother lived with him, finally able to see her son thrive instead of struggle. And Thomas Murphy. Thomas had become exactly what James predicted. The angry young man digging ditches by hand in 2011 now controlled 720 acres and ran the largest livestock operation in Polk County. He had helped 6 young farmers start their own operations, pushing them as hard as he pushed himself. "You don't get my help unless you're willing to outwork everyone," Thomas told each one. "That's the deal. Work harder than you think you can. That's how you honor the people who believed in you." James watched all of this from his modest farmhouse. Same house he had lived in since 1968. Same porch where he had sat with Eleanor before she died. Same land that had witnessed every triumph and tragedy of his life. He was 75 years old now. His hands shook sometimes. His back ached from decades of farm work. But his mind was sharp, and his purpose was clear. "You should slow down," Paul told him one December evening. "Let the foundation run itself. You've done enough. There's no such thing as enough. James, you've helped almost 50 farmers. You've given away millions of dollars. You've created something that will last forever. What more is there?" James looked out the window at the snow falling on his fields. Walter Price didn't slow down. He worked until the day he lost his farm.
Eleanor didn't slow down. She loved me and our children until her last breath. I'm not going to slow down either. You're stubborn. I'm consistent. There's a difference. Christmas 2018 was quiet. James's children came home as they always did. James Jr. brought his wife and 2 teenage daughters. David brought his partner, a man named Christopher, who worked as an architect in Minneapolis. Tanya brought her husband and 3 young children. The farmhouse was full of noise and laughter for the first time in months. James sat in his chair and watched his family swirl around him, feeling Eleanor's presence in every corner. "Dad, are you okay?" Tanya asked, noticing his silence. "I'm perfect. Just thinking." "About what?" "About your mother. About what she would think of all this." Tanya sat beside him, took his weathered hand in hers.
She would be so proud, Dad. Of you, of us, of everything you've built.
"I didn't build it alone."
No, but you started it, and that's what matters.
James squeezed her hand. "I'm tired, Tanya. Not the bad kind of tired. The kind that comes from a life well lived."
Dad, don't talk like that.
"I'm not being morbid. I'm being honest. I've done what I came here to do. Whatever happens next, I'm ready." New Year's Eve came and went. James watched the ball drop on television, surrounded by grandchildren who didn't really understand why this old man was so important to so many people. January 3rd, 2019. A Friday morning. Cold, clear. Typical Iowa winter. James woke early, as he always did. Made coffee. Sat on his porch despite the cold. Watched the sun rise over his land. He thought about Eleanor. About the day they met in 1965, when she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he was a young man with nothing but dreams. About their wedding. About the births of their 3 children. About that terrible day in 1975 when she held their daughter for 15 minutes before slipping away. He thought about Walter Price. About the kindness that had saved James when he was drowning. About the auction where he watched Walter lose everything. About the promise he had made to himself that day. He thought about the 47 farmers he had helped. About Sarah and David and Thomas. About Michael Chen and Jennifer Walsh and Lisa Washington. About the young people just starting out, finding their way because someone had given them a chance. He thought about the foundation. About Paul Harrison and the trustees. About the $6.2 million that would continue helping farmers for decades after he was gone. He thought about his children, successful, independent, carrying Eleanor's light into the future. James closed his eyes, felt the cold air on his face, smiled.
I kept my promise, baby, he whispered. I hope you're proud.
When his son found him 2 hours later, James was still sitting on the porch, still facing his land, still smiling. He had died peacefully, doing exactly what he had done every morning for 50 years, watching the sunrise over Iowa, thinking about the people he loved. The news spread quickly. Paul Harrison got the call first. He was in his kitchen, pouring his second cup of coffee, when James Jr.'s name appeared on his phone. "Paul, it's James. My father," the voice broke. "He's gone." Paul set down his coffee. His hand was shaking. "When?" "This morning, on the porch. He was watching the sunrise." Paul closed his eyes, felt something inside him crack. That's exactly how he would have wanted it. "I know. That's what we keep telling ourselves." "Is there anything I can do?" "Just be there. At the funeral. He would have wanted you there." "I wouldn't miss it for anything." Paul hung up, stood in his kitchen, didn't move for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and started making calls. Sarah Jenkins was in her barn when her phone rang.
Sarah, it's Paul Harrison. Mr. Harrison, is everything okay?
No, James is gone. Silence. Then a sound that broke Paul's heart. A sob so deep it seemed to come from somewhere primal.
No, 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 no. He passed this morning, peacefully, on his porch. I was going to visit him next week. I was going to tell him about the expansion. I was going to show him the papers. I was going to...
He knew, Sarah. He always knew.
But I never told him.
Her voice cracked completely.
I never told him what he meant to me. Not really. Not enough.
You showed him every day, every acre you farmed, every success you had. He saw it all.
It's not the same.
It is, Sarah. It's exactly the same. David Rodriguez was at his mother's house when Paul called. David, I have some news. James Wilson passed away this morning. David didn't respond.
David, are you there?
I'm here. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a man trying very hard not to fall apart.
How?
In his sleep, on his porch, watching the sunrise.
That sounds like him.
It does.
My mother is going to...
David stopped, took a breath. She's not going to take this well. She loved him. We all loved him.
I know.
He gave me my life, Paul. Do you understand that? Everything I have, everything I am, it all started with him.
He knew that.
Did he? Did he really know?
He kept track of you, David. All of you. He had folders, updates, photos. He watched you succeed, and it made him prouder than anything in the world.
David was quiet for a moment. I paid off that tractor in 3 years. Did you know that?
I know.
He told me to take 5 years. I did it in 3. Because I wanted him to see. I wanted him to know that I was worthy of what he gave me.
He saw. He knew.
I'm going to help more people now because of him. I'm going to find young farmers and give them chances, just like he did for me. That's all he ever wanted. Thomas Murphy didn't answer his phone. Paul drove out to his farm instead, found Thomas in his barn, working on a piece of equipment. Same intensity he had shown 8 years ago, digging that drainage ditch by hand. Thomas. Thomas didn't look up. I heard.
How?
Sarah called, then David, then 3 other people. He kept working, hands moving, eyes focused on the machine in front of him.
He's really gone?
This morning. Thomas stopped, set down his wrench, still didn't look at Paul. I never thanked him.
What?
I never thanked him. Not properly, not the way he deserved. Thomas's voice was rough, tight. He gave me everything, a tractor, a chance, a reason to keep fighting. And I never once sat down with him and said the words. He knew, Thomas. You don't understand. Thomas finally looked up. His eyes were red. I was so angry for so long. At my father, at the banks, at everyone. I used that anger to build all this. He gestured at the farm around him. But I never let go of it long enough to just say thank you.
You can still say it.
He's dead, Paul.
Then say it at the funeral. Say it to his children. Say it to everyone who will listen. Tell them what he meant to you. Tell them what he did. That's how you thank a man like James Wilson. You make sure the world knows his story.
Thomas was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to speak at the funeral.
Good.
I'm going to tell them everything about my father, about the tractor, about what he saw in me when I couldn't see anything in myself.
That's exactly what he would have wanted.
Thomas picked up his wrench, started working again. 720 acres, Paul. That's what I have now, and I owe every single one of them to a man in dirty boots who wouldn't take no for an answer. The funeral was held on January 12th, 1919, at the same community hall where the foundation had launched 7 years earlier. Over 300 people came. They came from Iowa and Nebraska and Minnesota and South Dakota. They came from California and Texas and New York. They came from 5 states and a dozen professions, all connected by one man who had changed their lives with dirty boots and used tractors. Paul Harrison spoke first. I met James Wilson on March 15, 2011. He walked into my dealership looking like he couldn't afford a lawnmower. When he said he wanted to buy 12 tractors, my saleswoman laughed. Actually laughed at him. Paul's voice caught. He took a moment to compose himself. That laugh haunts me, because in that moment, she was everything wrong with the world. She judged a man by his clothes, by his appearance, by every superficial measure that doesn't matter. He looked at the crowd. James taught me what real wealth looks like. It's not in bank accounts. It's not in new trucks or fancy houses. It's in the lives you change, the people you help, the legacy you leave behind. Paul stepped away from the podium. Sarah Jenkins took his place.
Mr. Wilson gave me a tractor worth $39,000, she said, her voice shaking. But that's not what he gave me. He gave me belief. Belief that a black woman from a failed farm family could make it. Belief that my dreams weren't crazy. Belief that someone out there thought I was worth taking a chance on.
She wiped her eyes.
I own 380 acres now, free and clear. Every single acre exists because James Wilson looked at me and saw something worth investing in. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that investment.
David Rodriguez spoke next. My father lost his farm in 2003. Lost his will to live not long after. I grew up believing that farming was a curse, that the land took more than it gave, that anyone who tried to farm was destined for failure. He paused. James Wilson changed that. He gave me a tractor and told me that my father's failure didn't have to be mine, that I could redeem my family's name, that I could prove everyone wrong. David's mother was crying in the front row. He looked at her. I paid off that tractor in 3 years. I own 480 acres now. My mother lives with me on a farm surrounded by land that belongs to us. My father's story ended in tragedy. Mine won't, because of James Wilson. Thomas Murphy was the last of the 12 to speak. He walked to the podium like he was approaching a battlefield. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. I didn't like James Wilson when I met him. The room went quiet. He showed up at my job, asked me personal questions, dug into my family's history. I thought he was nosy. Thought he was trying to use my father's suicide for some kind of feel-good story. Thomas gripped the podium.
But he wasn't. He was trying to understand me, trying to figure out if I had what it takes. And when he decided I did, he gave me a tractor worth $41,000. Free. No strings, no conditions. His voice dropped. I was so angry back then. Angry at my father for giving up. Angry at the banks for destroying him. Angry at everyone who had ever told me I'd end up the same way. Thomas looked at the photograph of James that sat beside the podium. James told me to use that anger. Channel it into building something. Prove everyone wrong.
So that's what I did. I worked 18 hours a day. I built something from nothing. I proved every single person wrong. He paused. I own 720 acres now. I run the largest livestock operation in Polk County, and I've helped 6 young farmers start their own operations, because that's what James asked me to do. Help someone else when you're able. Pass it on. Thomas's voice finally broke. I never told him thank you. Not really. I was too proud, too angry, too stubborn. But I'm telling him now. He looked at the photograph. Thank you, James, for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself, for believing in me when I had given up on everything, for teaching me that anger can build instead of destroy. One by one, the other farmers spoke. Michael Chen flew in from California. Jennifer Walsh drove from Minnesota. Lisa Washington brought her children, now grown, to tell their own stories. 44 farmers stood in that room. 44 lives changed by one man's generosity. 44 testimonies to what real wealth could accomplish. Karen Mitchell was there too, the saleswoman who had laughed at James that March morning in 2011. She had quit Stevens John Deere 6 months after the incident. Couldn't look at herself in the mirror anymore. Couldn't pretend that her judgment of James Wilson wasn't a reflection of everything wrong with her life. She didn't speak at the funeral. Didn't feel she had the right. But she sat in the back row and cried through every testimony. Cried for the man she had dismissed. Cried for all the other customers she had turned away because they didn't look right. Cried for the person she might have been if she had learned James's lesson earlier. James's children spoke last. James Jr. talked about growing up on the farm, watching his father work from sunup to sundown, never understanding why until he was an adult. David talked about coming out to his father and being accepted without question, without hesitation, without judgment. Tanya talked about her mother, about the promise James had made, about the 44 years he had spent keeping it. Our father was not a perfect man, Tanya said. He was stubborn. He was demanding. He expected us to work as hard as he did, and he was disappointed when we fell short. She smiled through her tears. But he loved us with everything he had. And he loved this community, loved the farmers he helped, loved the idea that one person could make a difference. Tanya held up her mother's photograph, the same one James had kept on his desk for 44 years. Mama asked Dad to make a promise before she died. She said, "Don't let them give up on you, and don't you give up on them." Dad spent the rest of his life honoring that promise. She placed the photograph next to James's. They're together now, finally, after 44 years apart. And I know that wherever they are, they're looking down at all of you, at everything Dad built, and they're proud. The funeral ended. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, as if leaving would make James's death more real. Paul Harrison stayed behind, helped clean up, found himself standing in front of James's photograph, unable to move. "You changed my life," he said quietly. "You changed all of our lives, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of that." The Walter Price Agricultural Foundation continued. Paul Harrison served as chairman until 2022. Michael Chen took over after that, flying in from California for quarterly meetings, continuing the work James had started. By 2024, the foundation had helped 47 farmers in its first 13 years. The endowment had grown to $6.2 million. Conservative projections suggested the foundation could continue operating for at least 100 years, helping 3 to 4 farmers annually, changing lives long after everyone who knew James Wilson was gone. Sarah Jenkins became a trustee in 2020. She instituted a program specifically for single mothers who wanted to farm, inspired by her own experience. David Rodriguez established a mentorship network, connecting successful farmers with young people just starting out. Over 60 mentorship pairs had formed by 2024. Thomas Murphy created a crisis fund for farmers facing foreclosure, providing emergency loans to help families keep their land. He personally reviewed every application, looking for the same thing James had looked for in him: hunger, determination, the willingness to work harder than anyone else. The 12 farmers from 2011 collectively owned 3,840 acres by 2024. Their combined net worth exceeded $16 million. Every single one of them had helped at least one other farmer get started. The multiplication that James had dreamed of was happening. The circle was widening. The legacy was growing. Karen Mitchell never fully recovered from that March morning in 2011. But she tried. She donated to the foundation anonymously, volunteered at agricultural education programs, told James's story to anyone who would listen, always including her own shame. "I laughed at him," she would say. "I looked at his dirty boots and his stained jacket, and I laughed. And I was wrong. So wrong. Don't be like me. Don't judge people by how they look. The richest man in the room might be wearing the oldest clothes." James Wilson was buried beside Eleanor on the farm they had built together. Same modest headstone she had. Same simple inscription. James Robert Wilson, 1943 to 2019. He kept his promise. The farmland was sold according to James's wishes. 2,000 acres divided among 12 buyers. All of them young farmers who had been helped by the foundation. Sarah Jenkins bought 160 acres. David Rodriguez bought 240. Thomas Murphy bought 400. The farmhouse was preserved as a museum and meeting place for the foundation. James's desk remained exactly as he had left it. His wall of photographs still displayed every farmer he had ever helped. His coffee cup sat on the windowsill where he had placed it that final morning. Paul Harrison visited the farmhouse every month until his own death in 2026. He would sit in James's chair, look at the photographs, remember the man who had taught him what real wealth looked like. 47 farmers, Paul would say to visitors. 47 lives changed. Thousands of acres now owned by people who started with nothing. Millions of dollars generated for families who never expected to have anything. He would point to James's photograph on the wall. All because one man in dirty boots walked into my dealership and asked to buy 12 tractors. All because my saleswoman laughed at him. And he decided to teach us all a lesson. Paul would shake his head, still amazed after all those years. The richest man I ever met looked like he couldn't afford lunch. The most generous person I ever knew wore the same stained jacket every day of his life. The greatest legacy I ever witnessed was built with used tractors and second chances. He would look out the window at the land James had accumulated over a lifetime of patience and discipline. James Wilson proved that money is only as valuable as what you do with it. He proved that helping one person creates a ripple that touches hundreds. He proved that the best investment you can make is in someone else's future. Paul would stand, take one last look at the photographs, head for the door. The dealer's saleswoman laughed at the farmer who wanted 12 tractors. Then she froze when she found out who he really was. But the real story wasn't about her. It wasn't about the dealership. It wasn't even about the money. He would pause at the threshold.
It was about a promise made to a dying wife in 1975. A promise kept for 44 years. A promise that changed more lives than anyone could count. Paul would close the door behind him. That's James Wilson's legacy. That's what $2.3 million and dirty boots can do.
And that's why I spent the last 15 years of my life trying to be worthy of the lesson he taught me. 5 years after James Wilson's death, on a cold March morning in 2024, Sarah Jenkins stood in front of Stephen's John Deere dealership. The same dealership where James had been laughed at 13 years ago. The same showroom where Karen Mitchell had looked at his dirty boots and decided he wasn't worth her time. Sarah was 42 now, owner of 380 acres, president of the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation. And today, she was about to do something James would have loved. She walked through the front door. A young salesman looked up from his desk, smiled politely. "Can I help you find something?" Sarah was wearing her work clothes, mud on her boots, grease on her jacket, jeans that had seen better days. She looked exactly like James had looked that Tuesday morning in 2011. "I want to buy some tractors," she said. The salesman's smile flickered, just slightly, just enough for Sarah to notice. "Of course. How many were you thinking?" 8. The salesman blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say 8? "Yes, 8 John Deere tractors. Today." Sarah watched his face, watched him make the same calculations Karen Mitchell had made, the same assumptions, the same judgments. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he stood up, extended his hand. "I'm Tyler. Let me show you what we have." Sarah shook his hand, felt something ease in her chest. Maybe things had changed. Maybe James's story had taught people something. Maybe the next generation of salespeople wouldn't make the same mistakes. Or maybe Tyler was just smarter than Karen had been. Either way, Sarah was grateful. "Before we look at tractors," she said, "I want to tell you something." "Okay." 13 years ago, a man walked into this dealership. He was wearing dirty boots and a stained jacket. He asked to buy 12 tractors. Your saleswoman laughed at him. Tyler's face changed. He knew this story. Everyone in Marshall County knew this story. "James Wilson," Tyler said quietly. "You've heard of him." "Everyone has. My uncle worked here back then. He saw the whole thing, said it was the most incredible thing he'd ever witnessed. That man changed my life, gave me a tractor when I had nothing, believed in me when no one else would." Sarah pulled out her checkbook. "Now I'm buying 8 tractors for 8 young farmers who can't afford them. Because that's what James would have done. That's what he taught me to do." Tyler stared at her. Then he smiled. A real smile, the kind that comes from understanding. "Let me get my manager. I think he's going to want to hear this." 3 hours later, Sarah drove away from Stephen's John Deere with 8 tractors on order. Total cost? $342,000. Paid in full. Cash. The Walter Price Agricultural Foundation was about to change 8 more lives. The first delivery went to Marcus Thompson, Jr., no relation to James Wilson, just a young black man from Chicago who had discovered farming through a summer job and never looked back. He was 24 years old, had saved $11,000 over 3 years, worked 2 jobs while taking agricultural classes at night, and dreamed of owning land that he could pass down to his children. Sarah found him working at a grain elevator outside of Marshalltown. Same kind of job James had never had to work because he'd been lucky enough to inherit his father's knowledge of the land. Marcus wasn't lucky. He had to learn everything from scratch. But he had the hunger. Sarah could see it in his eyes. "Marcus Thompson?" Marcus looked up, wiped dust from his face. "That's me. Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm with the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation." Marcus's eyes widened. He knew that name. Everyone in Iowa agriculture knew that name. The foundation that gives tractors to farmers? That's the one. I applied last year, never heard back. I know. That's why I'm here. Sarah handed him an envelope. Same kind James had handed her 13 years ago. Same weight. Same hope inside. "Open it." Marcus's hands were shaking as he tore the paper. Read the contents. Read them again. This says I'm getting a tractor. A 1982 John Deere 4640, worth $46,000. It's yours, free and clear. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there with the paper in his hands, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why me?" Sarah smiled. The same smile James had given her all those years ago. "Because 13 years ago, I was you. Struggling, dreaming, wanting to farm more than anything in the world. And a man in dirty boots gave me a chance when nobody else would." James Wilson. You know about him? Everyone knows about him. He's a legend. He wasn't a legend. He was just a man who understood that money means nothing if you don't use it right. Marcus looked at the paper again, then at Sarah, then at the sky, like he was talking to someone who wasn't there. "My grandmother used to say that God sends angels when you need them most. She said they don't always look like angels. Sometimes they look like ordinary people doing extraordinary things." What do you think James Wilson was? Marcus wiped his eyes, didn't try to hide the tears. "I think he was proof that one person can change the world, one tractor at a time." The deliveries continued throughout the spring. 8 tractors, 8 farmers, 8 lives changed forever. David Rodriguez helped with the paperwork. Thomas Murphy inspected each tractor personally, making sure every machine was in perfect condition before it went to its new owner. James would have done the same thing, Thomas said, running his hand along the hood of a 1979 4440. He never gave anyone a tractor that wasn't ready to work. Said it was a matter of respect. "You've changed, Thomas," Sarah observed. "What do you mean?" "When I first met you, you were angry. At everything. At everyone." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "I was. For a long time. Used that anger to build everything I have." He looked out at his 720 acres. "But somewhere along the way, the anger turned into something else." "What?" "Gratitude. Took me a while to get there. But I realized that being angry at the world doesn't honor my father's memory. Helping people does." "James would be proud of you." "I hope so. I really hope so." The Foundation's annual meeting was held in August 2024. Same community hall where James had launched the Foundation 13 years earlier. Same folding chairs. Same coffee and donuts in the back. But the crowd was different now. Bigger. More diverse. Farmers from 4 states. Donors from across the country. Journalists who wanted to write about the miracle happening in rural Iowa. Sarah stood at the podium, looked out at the faces before her. 13 years ago, a man named James Wilson stood where I'm standing now. He was wearing dirty boots and a stained jacket. He had $2.3 million in his checking account and a dream of helping young farmers succeed. She paused, let the weight of the words settle. James helped 47 farmers directly. But that's not the whole story. Those 47 farmers have helped 112 more. and those 112 have helped others, and on and on and on. Sarah pulled out a piece of paper, read from it. As of today, the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation has been directly or indirectly responsible for helping 231 farmers get started. Those farmers collectively own over 18,000 acres of land. Their combined net worth exceeds $42 million. The room erupted in applause. Sarah waited for it to die down. But those are just numbers. They don't tell you about the families who didn't lose their farms, the children who grew up with stability instead of chaos, the communities that survived because young people stayed instead of leaving for the cities. She looked at the photograph of James that hung on the wall behind her. James Wilson didn't just give people tractors. He gave them hope. He gave them belief. He gave them the chance to become the people they were meant to be. Sarah's voice cracked. She took a moment to compose herself. I was a school teacher making $38,000 a year when James found me. I had a dream, but no way to make it real. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and he bet on me when the whole world said I was a bad investment. She held up her hands. These hands have worked 380 acres for 13 years. They've pulled crops from the ground. They've fixed broken equipment. They've signed checks to help other farmers get started. Sarah lowered her hands. James Wilson taught me that wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give away. And the more you give, the richer you become. After the meeting, Sarah found Thomas Murphy standing in front of James's photograph. He was alone, silent, staring at the image of the man who had changed his life. "You okay?" Sarah asked. "I've been thinking about something James said to me, the day he gave me that tractor." "What did he say?" "He said the angry ones are always the most determined. He said I would build an empire just to prove the world wrong." He was right. Thomas shook his head. He was only half right. I did build something, but not to prove the world wrong. Not anymore. Then why? Because of him. Because he believed in me when I didn't believe in anything. Because he saw a future I couldn't imagine. Thomas's voice was rough, thick with emotion. I built everything I have so that one day I could stand here and say, he was right to take a chance on me. Sarah put her hand on Thomas's shoulder. He knew, Thomas. He always knew. I wish I could tell him. You just did. The years continued to pass. The foundation grew stronger. The network of farmers expanded. The legacy of James Wilson multiplied in ways no one could have predicted. In 2026, the Des Moines Register published a feature story on the foundation's 15th anniversary. The headline read, "The Farmer in Dirty Boots Who Changed Everything." The article told James's story from the beginning. The sharecropper's son from Alabama. The young wife who died too soon. The promise made in those final 15 minutes. The 44 years spent keeping it. But more importantly, the article told the stories of the farmers who had been helped. The ripple effects that had spread across 4 states. The millions of dollars in wealth created. The families saved. The communities strengthened. Karen Mitchell was interviewed for the article. She was 71 now, retired, living in a small apartment in Des Moines, still carrying the weight of that laugh from 2011. "I think about him every day," she told the reporter. "Every single day. I think about how I judged him, how I dismissed him, how I laughed at him in front of everyone." "Do you regret it?" "Regret doesn't begin to describe it. That moment changed my life, made me look at myself and hate what I saw, made me spend the next 13 years trying to become someone worthy of James Wilson's forgiveness." "Did you ever ask for his forgiveness?" Karen shook her head. "I couldn't. I was too ashamed."
But I donated to his foundation, anonymously, every year since it started. I figured that was the least I could do. How much have you donated? Karen was quiet for a long moment. Everything I had saved, about $200,000 over 13 years.
The reporter stared at her. You gave away your retirement savings? It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. It was the only way I knew how to say I was sorry. The article was published on March 15th, 2026. Exactly 15 years after James Wilson walked into Stephen's John Deere and changed everything. That same day, Sarah Jenkins received a letter. It was from Karen Mitchell. The letter was short, handwritten, stained with what looked like tears. Dear Ms. Jenkins, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that not a day goes by when I don't think about what I did, about how I laughed at the man who gave you your life. I've tried to make it right, donated to the foundation, volunteered, told James's story to anyone who would listen. But I know it's not enough. It can never be enough. I'm dying, Ms. Jenkins. Cancer. The doctors say I have 3 months, maybe less. And before I go, I needed you to know. I'm sorry. For everything. For the laugh. For the judgment. For being the kind of person who couldn't see past dirty boots and a stained jacket. James Wilson was the richest man I ever met, and I was too blind to see it. Please tell his family I'm sorry. Please tell them that their father changed me, changed who I am, made me spend the last 15 years of my life trying to become someone better. I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried. Karen Mitchell. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she got in her truck and drove to Des Moines. Karen Mitchell's apartment was small, clean, sparse. The apartment of someone who had given away everything she had. Sarah knocked on the door. A frail woman answered, thin, pale, eyes that had seen too much regret. Miss Jenkins? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. How did you find me? Your return address was on the letter. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I. They stood there for a moment, 2 women connected by a man in dirty boots, one who had laughed at him, one who had been saved by him. Can I come in? Sarah asked. Karen stepped aside. The apartment was bare. A couch, a table, a few photographs on the wall. One of them was James Wilson's obituary, cut from the newspaper and framed. You kept this? Sarah asked. I look at it every day, remind myself of what I did, what I lost. Sarah sat down on the couch. Karen sat across from her. I got your letter, Sarah said. I know. That's why you're here. I came to tell you something. Karen waited. Her hands were trembling. James forgave you a long time ago. Karen's eyes filled with tears. How do you know? Because I asked him. Years ago. I asked him if he was angry at the woman who laughed at him. Do you know what he said? Karen shook her head. He said, that woman did me a favor. She reminded me why I was doing this. She reminded me that the world is full of people who judge by appearances. And every time I help a farmer who looks like me, who talks like me, who the world has decided isn't worth anything, I prove her wrong. I prove all of them wrong. Karen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. He wasn't angry at you, Karen. He was grateful. Because you gave him a mission. You gave him a purpose. Every tractor he gave away, every farmer he helped, he was responding to your laugh, turning it into something beautiful. I don't deserve this. None of us deserve grace. That's what makes it grace. Sarah reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Karen opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a check, made out to Karen Mitchell, for $50,000.
What is this?
Your donations to the foundation. Every penny you gave over the last 13 years, plus interest.
I don't understand.
James Wilson built the foundation to help people who need a second chance, people who made mistakes, people who want to become better than they were. Sarah stood up.
You made a mistake, Karen, a terrible one. But you've spent 15 years trying to make it right. James would have respected that. He would have wanted you to have this money, to use it for whatever time you have left.
Karen stared at the check, then at Sarah, then at the photograph of James on the wall.
He really forgave me? He never blamed you in the first place. That's who he was. That's who he taught all of us to be.
Karen clutched the check to her chest, sobbed like a child. Sarah knelt beside her, took her hands.
You're forgiven, Karen. Not by me, not by the foundation, by James himself. He forgave you the moment you laughed, because he understood something you didn't.
What?
That people who judge others are usually judging themselves.
That the cruelty we show to others is often the cruelty we feel inside. James didn't see an enemy when he looked at you. He saw someone in pain, someone who needed grace just as much as anyone else. Karen Mitchell died 6 weeks later. In her will, she left everything she had to the Walter Price Agricultural Foundation. The $50,000 Sarah had returned. Her apartment, her car, everything. Her final request was that her obituary include a single sentence. She laughed at James Wilson once. She spent the rest of her life trying to become worthy of his forgiveness. The foundation honored her request, and every year after, on March 15th, the anniversary of the day James walked into Stephen's John Deere, the foundation held a special ceremony. Not to remember the laugh, but to remember what came after. The tractors, the farmers, the lives changed, the families saved, the communities strengthened. The legacy of a man in dirty boots who understood that real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. In 2030, the foundation celebrated its 20th anniversary. Sarah Jenkins was 51 now, still farming, still running the foundation, still wearing the same kind of clothes James had worn. The ceremony was held at James Wilson's farmhouse, now a museum dedicated to his memory. Over 500 people attended, farmers from 6 states, donors from around the country, journalists from national publications. The wall of photographs had grown. What had started as 32 faces now showed over 300. Each one a life changed. Each one a testament to what one man's generosity could accomplish. Sarah stood at the podium one final time. 20 years ago, I received a tractor from a man I barely knew. That tractor was worth $39,000, but its real value was immeasurable. She looked at the faces before her, young farmers, old farmers, families, children, all connected by a single thread. James Wilson taught me that money is just a tool, like a tractor, like a plow. What matters is what you do with it, what you build, what you grow, what you leave behind. Sarah held up a photograph, the same one James had kept on his desk for 44 years. Eleanor Wilson, young and beautiful, smiling at the camera. This is Eleanor, James's wife. She died in 1975, giving birth to their daughter. But before she died, she made James promise something. Sarah's voice was steady now, strong, certain. She said, "Don't let them give up on you, James, and don't you give up on them." She set the photograph down. James kept that promise for 44 years, and when he died, he passed it on to us, to all of us, every farmer he helped, every life he changed, every person in this room. Sarah looked at the crowd. The promise doesn't belong to James anymore. It belongs to us, and it's our job to keep it,
To help the people who need help, to believe in the people nobody believes in, to give chances to the people the world has written off. She pointed to the wall of photographs. 312 farmers, 18,000 acres, $42 million in wealth created, 20 years of growth, 20 years of hope, 20 years of proving that one person can change the world. Sarah smiled. James Wilson walked into a dealership in dirty boots and asked to buy 12 tractors. The saleswoman laughed at him. But James didn't get angry. He didn't walk away. He wrote a check and changed everything. She paused. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. When the world laughs at you, don't stop. Don't quit. Don't let them win. Write the check anyway. Do the work anyway. Build the dream anyway. Sarah stepped away from the podium. Because the richest man in the room is usually the one nobody notices. And the greatest wealth is the wealth you give away. The room was silent. Then Thomas Murphy stood up, started clapping. David Rodriguez joined him. Then Sarah's mother. Then 300 other people. The applause echoed off the walls, filled the room, spilled out into the Iowa evening. And somewhere, in the golden light of sunset, a man in dirty boots smiled. His promise had been kept. His wife was proud. His legacy would last forever. Not in bank accounts, not in land, not in tractors, but in the hearts of every person who had learned what he had spent a lifetime teaching. That real wealth isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by what you give. And the more you give, the richer you become. James Wilson never needed anyone to know he was wealthy. He just needed to use it right. And he did, every single day, until his last breath, and beyond. The farmer walked into the dealership wanting 12 John Deeres. The saleswoman laughed. Then she froze when she found out who he really was. But the real story was never about the money. It was about a promise made to a dying wife. A promise kept for 44 years. A promise that changed more lives than anyone could count. That's the legacy of James Wilson. That's the power of dirty boots and a generous heart. And that's why, 20 years later, 500 people stood in an Iowa farmhouse and wept for a man most of them had never met. Because he had changed them anyway. One tractor at a time. One life at a time. One promise at a time. Forever.